So thank you for joining us today, and what we're going to do is just take the sessions that we've done, the last 4 sessions on how to know how to set your camera, to the last step, which we slightly explored with the last lesson, which was exploring what's possible in your photographic opportunity. So when you're out shooting, don't just shoot what you immediately see first and walk on. Think, if it's a great subject, how can I milk this subject and get absolutely everything out of it, and think outside the box about how can I shoot it. We're going to just start with number 1, which is our standard and predictable approach, and then think about mixing it up, and then thinking about creative opportunities. And I'm really going to explore ICM because I've promised you I would teach you in more detail how to shoot with intentional camera movement. What I'm going to use as an example is a guest visited me a couple of weeks ago, and she bought a beautiful great big bunch of Asiatic lilies. I thought, this is a great photographic opportunity, but how can I shoot them in an interesting way? I went into the web and researched both art and photography of how people had photographed bunches of Asiatic lilies. What I got back was fairly predictable, really. Vases of Asiatic lilies, and they're not bad photographs, but there's certainly nothing you would write home about. But one of the things that it did give me a clue on, and this is what I've said when we were planning a shoot, is what sort of lens would I need and what sort of lighting. And all of the photographs that I researched on the web had obviously used a long lens, and we can tell that because of the fact that they're fairly constrained in their aspect ratio, and somebody's looking sort of straight in at them, and there's no distortion in the lens, so it or in the image. So it shows you that they used a long lens, and I've got a favourite long lens, which is my 70-200, which is the one on the right there. In terms of lighting, I'll either use natural light if I'm doing bunches of vases of flowers and just put them near a window. But we had really poor weather and lots of rain and very little sun and very little light. So I decided to use an off-camera flash with a reflector. Now the off-camera flash is this one that I've got here, which is in a big softbox, and the reflector. And the advantage of this type of lighting is that great big softbox allows you to not have sharp shadows. It allows you to put it quite close to the subject and have the shadows fall off very, very lightly. The reflector, rather than using a flash on the second side, which was a bit of overkill, it just reflects back the light coming off the flash. So the light coming off the flash hits the subject and goes through to the reflector, who then bounces it back up to fill the shadows underneath. And with lighting, we talk about a key light and a fill light. And so the camera flash becomes the fill light, the key light, and the reflector becomes the fill light. So I thought, well, this will work. I'll try this. And I wanted to try and get some more creative looks. So I had a ladder and I put the pot on a pedestal. So I started with a standard approach, which is virtually what they had in the internet. And it just shot it with the 200mm lens. I used a really small aperture number, which is a wide open aperture of 2.8, to try and get a painterly, sort of a more artistic feel, that the sharpness was on the lily at the front and the rest of them faded in terms of sharpness. It's a nice photo. It's fairly standard, it's predictable, and it's pleasing. That's about really all I could say about it. It captured the lilies. So then I thought, well, let me have a look at, I looked at the lilies, and one of the things that they show me is there is a lot of tonal variation here. And wherever we have tonal variation, right from pure white to pure black, it makes a really good black and white. And the other thing is there's lots of structure and texture in this subject. So I thought, well, I'll have a look at photographing this with the aim of turning it to black and white. And it turned out, I think it's a more pleasing photo in black and white. It's not as common, I guess, because you rarely see these lilies photographed in black and white. So that's another thing to think about when you're shooting something. You've got one subject here. Let's think of different ways we can either shoot it or different ways we can treat it in our editing process. So then I tried mixing up the point of view, which is something that I suggest to all of you doing, is getting down low and shooting upwards, and if at all possible, getting up high and shooting downwards. I love that look of shooting downwards on subjects because often you get a more graphical perspective. When you're shooting straight on, anything in the foreground starts to obliterate something in the background. But when you shoot straight down, you can then see all the players within the area that you're shooting. So I tried one on the ladder and one getting down really low, looking up. I tried landscape, I tried portrait. And again, they're fairly predictable, but at least they're a little bit more interesting. Every one that I saw on the web was taken straight on. So this gives you a slightly different point of view, makes it a little bit more intriguing. So then I decided, well, look, I've got this long lens. It allows me to really zoom in. So I can still be about 2 meters away and get focus, but I can get close-ups and really good depths of field, sort of blurriness and sharpness. And the one on the right, I think, ended up being one of my favorite photos from the shoot because it's quite different to anything. I never saw anything on the web like that. So that's always my aim. I always start with the research. That gives me ideas on lighting and a lens, and then get the things out of the toolbox about point of view and black and white, and then thinking about, wide angle and close-ups. So reasonably pleased with that one on the right, and would have stopped there if we hadn't had today's lesson, which I wanted to teach you intentional camera movement. And this is something I want you to always have in your toolbox when you're out shooting, because it often gives you a really creative, artistic photograph that you otherwise wouldn't have got. And it's unusual. Very few people sort of use this technique. And so it's something that you can impress your family and friends with. Okay, so if you're going to use intentional camera movement, you need to be able to look at the scene. It doesn't suit everything. It probably only ever suits about 10% of things that you're shooting. But you need to look at it and think, is there distinct recognizable shapes? Would shapes be something that someone would help describe this photograph? And with the lilies, yes, there were. The shapes of the lily flowers were quite significant within the image. Was there strong tonal and colour variations? Yes, we had the bright pink going through white, and we also had the white of the lilies and the dark background. Opportunity there. Is there repetition and rhythm? Well, there was, in terms of the various lilies within the image. Yeah, we can do that. Distinct lines and curves. Yes, the lilies had sort of distinct lines and curves with them. One of the other things is simple scenes with strong graphical elements and minimal clutter. Well, I may need to rethink how I'm shooting this to try and minimize the clutter in the scene. But everything else ticked the box. So when you're out shooting and you love this scene in front of you, go through this checklist and say, is it a potential for intentional camera movement? Can I try some shots that way? Now, when you're doing intentional camera movement, the challenge with this is you're actually using a slow shutter speed, which means as soon as you slow down the shutter, it's open for a long time. A lot of light will flood your sensor. And the lower the ambient light's the light, natural light that you've got that you're currently shooting in, the lower that light is, the less problem you have with overexposure when you open up that shutter. So doing this in bright sunlight is a real challenge. And so when you're doing it in bright sunlight, I tend to use a neutral density filter, which is virtually just a piece of black glass on the front of my lens to stop my sensor being flooded with light. So weak ambient light is ideal. And because I was shooting inside, I had very weak ambient light. These are the sort of shots I came up with from that one vase, same lens, same position, same everything. But just got photographs that ended up more like art pieces than your standard photograph. And it's really unusual for people to actually do this with still life. They tend to do it always with big landscapes or streetscapes or forests. Rarely do they do it with still life. And the other thing that I combined it with flash. And what the flash did was, when you got your shutter wide open, your flash only fires for a millisecond. So when you've got the shutter wide open and you're moving the camera, you're getting blur. But for 1 millisecond, you've got the flash freezing movement. And so the advantage of using flash with this is you can see I can get some sharpness in there. And again, I haven't seen anything where other people have been combining flash with intentional camera movement. So have a bit of a play with that as well and see how that works for you. I really like this one down here on the left as well. I thought that worked really nicely. So these are your checklist when you want to do intentional camera movement. First, find your suitable scene. And I gave you that checklist of looking for tonal variations, looking for shapes, looking for color variations. And the reason why we need these tonal variations, color variations, because once we move the camera, it all becomes a blur. But the colors and the tones provide the information in the image. And so we need to have them there and quite contrasty. You're going to be moving the camera, but it's not a sloppy movement like this. I always hold the camera very firmly in both hands, my elbows against my body, and I use a wrist movement to move the camera. And it may be a sideways wrist movement, it may be a round one, it may follow the curves of something that I'm shooting, but I try and give it a single line for movement. I don't just wriggle it around. I give it a shape and I try and follow something within the scene that will stay in focus, because at the end of the day, you just want to give someone a blurry photo. Something in it needs to be sharp. So in these intentional camera movement shots, something needs to be sharp. It may only just be a stamen on a flower and the rest of it's blurry, but it then looks intentional rather than you took a shot while you're getting your camera out of the bag. So hold the camera firmly. The shutter speed is our absolute priority in this shooting. So when we're thinking about how do we need to set our camera, the first thing is the shutter speed. And so I tend to have my camera on manual, which I always shoot at. But if you're not used to using manual, then I think almost for this shoot, probably need to shoot on manual, but you can shoot on shutter priority if you want to. I usually start in the middle at about 1/6 of a second. This is a trial and error process. There's no right answer. It really means what your scene looks like, what the ambient lights look like, and how fast you wriggle the camera. So start it at a spot, and then it allows you to move within a range of about of 1/4 of a second to 2 seconds. 2 seconds is a very long time, but that's the shutter speed that you'll be working within. But start at a 1/6, work out, do you need it to have it faster? If it's too blurry, then you probably need to have it faster. If it's not blurry enough, then you need to have it slower. So the optimal shutter speed is really what do you want it to look like and how fast are you going to be moving this and how much ambient light you've got. The aperture tends to be as small a hole as you can possibly have that lens open, because we're flooding, because we're leaving this shutter open a long time, we're flooding the sensor. So what we want to do is minimize the size of the hole the light's coming through, and the aperture is the size of the hole that the light is coming in. So, you know, a minimum of 11, go up to about f22. I usually start at the highest, because if I'm opening up this shutter and I've got sunlight out there, I really need an f22. In this, because we're not worrying about depth of field here. Heavens, everything's going to be blurry. It doesn't matter. We can't control really the depth of field. So make sure that your aperture is right down tiny. The ISO has to be the lowest that your camera can deal with. One of my cameras goes down to 50. I tend to shoot at 50 to 100. Sometimes, you know, people have the lowest ISO of 200. Well, that's what you just have to deal with. Just take it to the lowest that you can. If you can't get your photograph not overexposed, so even once you've shut your aperture down to the smallest and reduced your ISO to the lowest, if you still can't stop overexposing your photo, that's when you need a neutral density filter on it. I rarely resort to that, mainly because I don't shoot in bright sunlight, but that is another option to enable you to manage the light in your camera. I focus on the thing that I'm going to be following. So if I'm in a forest and I'm trying to shoot the trees, I focus on the closest tree, and that's what I'll be following up and down, and it will keep that tree in focus right through the movement, and it will give me something sharp. So when you're positioning the focal point, it's whatever you're following. If you're following the waves and the froth and the waves, focus on the waves. I, in my flower photographs, was photographing and focusing on the front flower because that's the one I wanted in focus. When you shot, this is a trial and error process. This is a loop here. You do the shoot, you go look at the back of the camera, you're looking at the composition and what it looks like. You go, maybe I went too fast. I'll just slow down that wriggle. Or, oh, maybe it would look better with a horizontal wriggle. I tend to, when I'm doing the wriggle, get my indication of whether it's horizontal, vertical, round, curvy, by what's in the scene. And I'm following something in the scene that I'm trying to get sharp. And so it's rinse and repeat over and over and over again. And you may take 20 before you get the one that you go, oh, wow, really like that one. So the best sort of subjects are buildings because they have got that tonal variation. They've got quite distinct shapes. They provide simple photographs, and it gives you either a vertical or horizontal line to follow. Trees and orderly forests, so things like plantations of gum trees, pine trees, gardens will give you order because you're trying to minimize chaos you're introducing enough chaos with the camera movement. You don't need a scene that's chaotic. One of the other things that you can do is you can zoom your lens in and out as well. So not only trying intentional camera movement by wiggling horizontal and vertical, you can zoom the lens whilst you've got it focused and your shutter open, zoom it, and that then will give you sort of movement as well. So flowers and fields, and I showed you last week the tulip fields I'd done, seascapes, landscapes, lakes, really any scenario that follows those rules of shapes, color and tonal variations that are quite contrasty will give you good intentional camera movement. So you can do vertical pans, horizontal pans, zoom bursts where you're zooming in and out, curves and swirls, and you can also just give the camera a shake and see what that looks like. Hey, one of the things that I should have put is a warning up the front of this. This can become addictive. Some people, like me, if I'm out there and I can't think of anything more to shoot, I start doing this and I'm there for another hour. I love it. So these are all ones that I've taken when we've been out and about on our workshops, just in the streets. So just Melbourne CBD. And this is just in the middle of the day when we're shooting. This is the sort of look that you can get. And, these are the sort of images that could be a painting on a wall. So think about your photography as a way of expressing an artistic, inner creative part of you. This was up near RMIT, and you can see what I've tried to harness here is the shapes and the quite clear colour variances within the image, and just the vertical and horizontal lines. Usually I take buildings vertically. In this case, I did a horizontal sweep. The one on the left is the forest, just outside of Chuka when we were there. Again, the late afternoon sun was giving a really great tonal contrast on that forest, and it looks like a painting. These are just zooming my lens in and out, and you get a completely different look. There's a bit of a wiggle in the one on the left. So again, when you've got, one of those contrasty days that the photographs are just going to be rubbish, try and use this, because those contrasts in tones will give you interesting abstracts. And so the one on the left was just a bush that the light was hitting really, really brightly, and there was deep shadows inside the bush. Just gave the camera a wiggle. The flowers and sweeping movement with the tulip fields. The one on the right here, I actually did this one as a double exposure. I focused on the leaves as a still shot on the red autumn leaves, and then I did an ICM on the same scene. So this is when you have your opportunity to play with the possibilities of what your camera provides. Seascapes, they're great because you've got the colour and you've got the tonal variations of the waves breaking, the deep sea, and just the lines in the water. And you can see the painters actually almost, when they're painting, they see with their eyes a bit like ICM. But any simple scene will do. This day when I was playing with ICM, I saw these two guys having a chat, and I thought the tonal variations in that and the colour variations, I wonder what that would look like as an ICM, and I just gave the camera a bit of a wiggle. The one on the left is a nightscape, and nightscapes where there's artificial lighting are often very useful as well. And it was just taken from my balcony of I think it's only one tree, but I did an upsweep, and it looks like many trees because the upsweep gave me the lines of the branches. So it looks like a copse of trees. It's not. It's just one tree and the lights of the city behind it. So what I mentioned before is by adding a flash, if you're doing a still life or photographing something small in front of you, if you add the flash into the movement, you can get another effect entirely. And I quite liked experimenting with some of these things. So I'm hoping that you're all going to go away and just give it a try, and be careful of the addiction aspect. But I'd love to see next week an example. Now, this is a bit like tie-dyeing. You can end up with 100 disasters for one good one. So even if you haven't got your one good one, show me your disasters and we can talk about it. If you are going to show me one, if you can take a normal photo of it and then show me your ICM version, And that way I might be able to sort of give you some hints and clues about what you could do next time. So thank you very much, and have fun and don't become addicted.